people are scared. We need to get this one. They're dead. Shot with your weapon.
Condemned Criminal Origins, released in 2005, was a launch title for the Xbox 360, with a PC version following around a year later. Developed by Monolith and published by Sega, this game blends CSI, Seven, and bum fights all into a first-person survival horror game. You play as Ethan Thomas, an agent of the FBI's Serial Crime Unit division. While investigating the scene of a murder, you learn that the killer may still be in the building. You give chase and it doesn't end well. The suspect uses Ethan's gun to kill his police pals, framing Ethan for their murder. Ethan, now on the run from the law, must track the real killer and prove his innocence, all the while battling through a mysteriously crazed and violent homeless population of Metro City. And to make matters worse, Ethan is also haunted by nightmarish hallucinations along the way. If all that seems a bit mad to you, well, it's because it is, and it only gets crazier as you delve deeper into this game. Before being named Condemned Criminal Origins, the game was known as The Dark. An early build had many key differences to what ended up in the final version. The player character was named Agent Cross, not Ethan Thomas, and the game appeared to follow him through a government-sanctioned investigation instead of being a rogue agent on the run from the law. Agent Cross could also cast various magical spells. For example, he could pull a gun through the air from an enemy's hands, another spell could break open doors and obstacles, and all these elements ended up being scrapped by the developer, focusing, it seems, more on tools and melee combat rather than magic. This is one of those rare first-person melee games. Even though there are guns in this game, they are very rare to come by and have limited amount of ammo. The game's main focus is melee combat, specifically bludgeoning your enemies with weapons of all weights and sizes. We have lead pipes, crowbars, sledgehammers, fire axes, mannequin arms, pretty much whatever is lying around, and if it can be wielded, it can be used to brain the side of a junkie's head. Every weapon you find has different stats. Heavy weapons like a concrete rebar or a sledgehammer pack a wallop, but are slower to use and block with. Smaller weapons like a pipe is faster to swing but do less damage and can be tough blocking with. Then you have the medium-sized weapons like the paper cutter, which is kind of a happy medium between the light and heavy, and for me anyways, has a good balance of speed, damage and blocking ability. Speaking of blocking, you can't just hold the block button as you would a shield. You have to time your block as the enemies swing at you, as Ethan will lift his arm up for a second or two depending on what you're wielding at the time, and then put his arm back down. It can be difficult mastering the timing as well as reading your enemies, as they can feint that they're about to attack you, throwing you off and leaving you open to a few volleys round the head. Backing up your melee weapons is a stun gun which, as you would correctly imagine, stuns your enemies, just long enough for you to grab their weapon unarming them, or to put the boots to them to quickly finish them off. A good combination for most, it seems, is to stun them and quickly run up and kick them while they are down, killing most after one kick. The game balances the use of the stun gun by making sure you can't spam it too quickly and too often, as it requires a cooldown period of around 15 seconds or so between each fire. With that cooldown period, it makes dealing with groups of enemies some of the most stressful and tense parts of the game. Sometimes you can knock your enemies down to their knees where they are open to one of 4 special attacks. These are very much like Condemned's take on Mortal Kombat's finishing moves, adding a wee bit more flavour and brutality to the combat system. We have Ram, Snap, Slam and Punch, all finishing your enemy off as the selected move is executed. Beware though, as you are still open to damage from other enemies while these scripted kills play out. I mentioned that the enemy can feint a swing, but that's not the only trick up their sleeve. They will try to flank you if possible, and they will also use pillars or corners to hide around and then leap out to attack you, giving you a right good fright in the process, or sometimes not. The enemies are so jacked up on Rageahol that they will scrap with each other. Some of my favourite moments are coming upon a slew of enemies all battering each other while I watch in the wings, just waiting to pick off that last unlucky survivor. When you're damaged, you get health refills from medical cabinets. No rechargeable health here. There is a finite amount of wee medical boxes lying around each level, and having played through on normal difficulty seems to be more than enough to keep your health topped up. Although you will still have times where you're wandering around low on health, stressfully looking for any medical kits. All good traditional survival horror stuff. There's also collectibles. Every level has 6 dead birds scattered around for you to find, as well as 3 metal pieces. These add very little but replayability, serving as small rewards for going off the beaten path in levels. Collect them all and you unlock behind the scenes footage of development of the game, as well as artwork and early sketches. In between bouts with Metro City's finest and craziest bums, you will be doing some investigating. Ethan has all manners of CSI gadgetry on him and is able to send fingerprints, fluid samples and pictures to his partner at the FBI. Thankfully the police didn't think to terminate your direct communication to the SCU offices, where Rosa helps by analysing the clues you are sending her, as she believes you are innocent.
I didn't kill those guys.
I know, Thomas. Well, I'm not certain what I do or don't know, but I'm pretty sure I still trust you. And that goes a long way.
These downtimes using the CSI tech and searching for clues are quite neat at first, but I think I would have preferred more variety and puzzle solving in the finding of clues. It's all rather repetitive. Game prompts you to use detection tool, you follow or look for anything bright showing up, and then you retrieve it by pointing a camera or light and pressing the fire button, sending the info Rosa's way. Ethan doesn't really solve anything himself, instead relying on Rosa to piece everything together while we move from one location to the next, battering bums along the way. It's a minor thing, but I would have liked some element of interactive puzzle solving. The game's atmosphere is where it excels. The game is thick with it. Cries of pain off in the distance, rats scurrying, bottles being smashed, floorboards creaking, bums shouting at each other. Couple this with movement of shadows, bizarre visual hallucinations and blood spatter on tiled textures, all looking gruesomely detailed and grim, all amounting to top visual and audio design. This game needs to be played with headphones. Not only will this give you an edge in hearing enemies closing in on you, you will get to hear all the creepy ambience that every level seems to be filled with. Main standout level for me being the abandoned mall with worn Christmas decorations strewn everywhere. Walking by mannequins when you hear threatening whispers, confused and unsure where they're coming from, you continue onwards only to see a mannequin walk from its stand and disappear behind a pillar. Top creepy stuff. It also has pretty decent and effective jump scare moments that don't really feel too cheap or repetitive. All of this combining to give Condemned a great, creepy and tense atmosphere. So you may be thinking, hey, this all sounds awesome, why haven't I heard much about this game, or why isn't it topping every top 10 horror games to play? Well, that's because it's not without its fair share of problems. The story, as mentioned, is mental. They could have simplified it to just being you on the run trying to catch a serial killer, or even used their original idea from the earlier build and have you just being tasked by the government to track down a serial killer. Instead we have some convoluted mess. I don't want to spoil anything really for those who haven't played it, but I Also don't think I could clarify the story in a reasonable manner. It's not so awful that it ruins the game, but even an average story, an average simpler story would have sufficed. It all felt needlessly complicated. And onto the graphics. Yes, this is now a 10-year-old game. In 2005 I sat with my Xbox 360 and I thought this game's texture work, particularly in the subway, and lighting was amazing, and to be honest still stands up quite well today, mostly. Character models look like claymation potato people, Ethan, bizarrely, being the worst example. There's also big blurry low-res textures that can be very noticeable at times. Again, I will reiterate, it's a decade old and was a launch title for a brand new system for the time, so I won't go on about it too much, but yeah, it can be pretty bad for some, especially if you are new to this game. Playing this on PC doesn't really help improve any of these problems. Footage you're seeing here is everything maxed out at 1080p, and while everything is running at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second compared to the sometimes jittery 30 frames per second of the Xbox version, the low def textures are not improved any. If you are a stickler for graphics, then yeah, this game won't be winning any favours from you. There's a couple of really dodgy scripted events, one where you're on the back of a train fighting off enemies. The whole thing doesn't run well and my sound kept cutting out, and another where you are in a dumpster that's rolling around the back alleys. Yes, it's a dumpster on the run. You're once again fighting off the homeless, probably because you're stealing their mobile home. And while I'm listing the game's faults, I can't not talk about the slow pace at which you walk up and down stairs. You already walk at a very slow pace in this game, and yes, you have the option to mildly jog for a whole 10 seconds before Ethan blows out a lung. None of that really actually bothers me. What does bother me is why, when confronted with stairs, Ethan tippy-toes his way up and down them. And no, you can't use the sprint function while on stairs. Thankfully, this game has elevators, so very rarely must you make your very slow decline or incline using stairs. And I think a problem for a lot of people when they first play Condemned is the general character movement. It just doesn't move or feel like a standard first person shooter. You are slow, you can't jump without the appropriate button prompt appearing on screen and only in certain areas. You can't crouch without those same restrictions. It feels so slow and cumbersome compared to just about every other first person shooter of the time. We're reaching the end of this review, roundup, retrospective, I don't know, whatever I end up calling this, and my thoughts overall, this is a good, solid game. I might have just listed quite a few things there or that detracts from the game, but it doesn't ruin it for me, and I still had a lot of fun playing this even 10 years later. Yes, it's dated, and yes, it is flawed, but I think it's such a unique Wii game that has a great atmosphere and one of the better first-person melee combat systems in any game. Would I recommend to all? No, I wouldn't, but if you enjoy games in the mould of the Penumbra series or Amnesia, then I think you will enjoy this. Thanks for watching, bye!
Mr. Simpson, I'm scared.
This is our life now, Millhouse. We're dumpster folk.